Hi, welcome back to Focal Point AFR Talk. Talking in that last segment with Sherry Few, who's a candidate for Superintendent of Education in the state of South Carolina. And I had one other soundbite that I had Jeff grab from me. We've played it before, but it's worth replaying again. We saw that Melissa Harris Perry clip. Brian Fisher is my name, by the way. The program is Focal Point. AFR Talk is the network. The soundbite from Melissa Harris Perry saying, look, this notion that children belong to their parents, this is antiquated. We've got to get past that. Children belong to all of us. Children belong to the village. And once we understand that, once we get past this antiquated notion that the children are the responsibility of their parents, and we realize that, no, they really belong to us, not to their parents. That's an outdated notion. Then we're going to be able to make some good decisions with regard to education. And, of course, that's just a justification then for those that run these state departments of education to cram their views down the throats of our children against the will of the parents. Now, we played this soundbite before, but this is a guy by the name of Paul Reville, used to be associated with Harvard University. So this guy's, he's a poobah. He's a guru when it comes to the issue of education. And listen to what he says, where he echoes the thinking of Melissa Harris Perry.
What we're doing at the national level here now, state by state, is what a lot of our states thought made sense individually. Why should some towns or cities in states have no standards or low standards and others have extremely high standards when the children belong to all of us and would move?
So the children belong to all of us. So that's what we're up against with Common Core and the federalizing of the education system. I mentioned briefly in talking with Sherry, and her website, by the way, if you want to get more information about her campaign for Superintendent of Education in the state of South Carolina, you can go to sherryfew. Is it .org or .com? Let me grab that. Sherryfew.com. It's SHERIFEW.com. Sherryfew.com. Again, this is not an endorsement. Just if you want more information, find out more about her campaign, that's where you can go. But I mentioned that Common Core is running into problems even in New York. I mean, the meme has been that the people that have a problem with Common Core are all these right-wingers. But now the state of New York is up in arms over Common Core. Now realize this thing kind of swept the nation before anybody really knew what was going on. 45 states adopted this. District of Columbia adopted Common Core. You know, and our fundamental problem is I don't even care if it's a good curriculum, frankly. I don't even care if it's a good curriculum. I do not want the federal government running education in America. Control of education needs to be local. We have people that are perfectly capable of making decisions about curriculum and standardized testing and all that kind of thing. We do not need to federalize this. In fact, I suggest that it harms the process of education when you take local control away from people who have to live with whatever decisions are made with regard to education. So this thing kind of took the nation by storm. It just kind of happened. This almost silent revolution. And I just don't want, I don't want a federal Department of Education. That thing ought to be out of there. There's no justification for that in the Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 gives absolutely zero authority to the federal government to have anything to do with education. It is not an authorized power of action that we, the people, have given to the federal government. Shouldn't be involved in education whatsoever. Now, here is the article from the New York Times about what's going on in New York. The newest chorus of complaints is coming from one of the most liberal states and one of the earliest champions of the standards, New York. And that is causing supporters of Common Core to shudder. In other words, if you lose New York, you are in big, big trouble. Carol Burris, an acclaimed high school principal on Long Island, calls the Common Core a disaster, end quote. We see kids, they don't want to go to school anymore. So this Common Core curriculum is so bizarre, so twisted, so confusing, so convoluted that it's robbing kids of whatever joy they had in the educational process. The statewide teachers union withdrew its support for the standards last month until, quote, major course corrections took place. Catherine T. Nolan, a Queens Democrat, she's the chairwoman of the State Assembly Education Committee. She said, there are days I think we have to slow this thing down. There are so many problems. Now, even Governor Andrew Cuomo, who's a Democrat, he's now a critic of Common Core. So you've got high school principals, you have Democrats who chair the committees on education in the state assembly, you've got the Democratic governor of the state, all of them now coming out opposed to Common Core. So this is helpful. If you're having conversations with people about this, about Common Core and why you oppose it, because it takes local control away, it takes parental control away, transfers it to Washington, D.C., and you get blowback from people and accuse you of just being some kind of extremist right-wing deal. You say no. I mean, the people in New York, Democrats, liberals in New York, whether they are politicians, whether they're the governor, whether they're high school principals, they're up in arms over Common Core as well. Now, you've had some states like Georgia and Oklahoma that have already backed out of the exams that are based on the standards. But in Albany, here's another paragraph from the Times piece. In Albany, leaders of both houses of the legislature called this month for a 2-year moratorium on the use of Common Core test scores in teacher evaluations and in decisions about student promotions or admissions. The State Teachers Union has asked for a 3-year pause. The State Board of Regents, which oversees education policy and is appointed by the legislature, has already voted to delay by 5 years the date by which all high school graduates must pass Common Core aligned Regents exams. And then they got the story about the state education commissioner. I assume that's what they call her, state superintendent, a commissioner. His name is John B. King. This is a guy who reports to the Board of Regents. And on the rollout deal, he was going around the state of New York introducing people to the wonders of Common Core. And listen to this. Dr. King was booed and shouted down as he made arguments in favor of Common Core at public forums he held around New York in the fall. They grew so testy at one point that he called the remaining forums off before scheduling new ones. So that is the latest with Common Core. If you want to join the conversation, 888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. Glad to have you do that. Glad to invite you to join the program. Now, a couple of items on the religious liberty front before we get into some other topics. I don't know if you heard this story, but there's a football coach at the University of Connecticut, and he has been forced to resign because he told the Hartford Courant, I don't know how you say it, that he and others were going to make sure that University of Connecticut players understand that, quote, Jesus Christ should be in the center of our huddle. So when that got out, the university put so much pressure on him that he resigned almost right away. Now, the university president, her name is Susan Herbst, and she said in her statement, the reason we have to fire this guy, we got to get rid of him, we've got to banish him, we have to engage in our form of church discipline. You know, remember how when churches, and I've got a story in the stack we're going to get to sometime where a church actually exercised church discipline for a guy that was involved in the sin of homosexuality and would not repent. And they said, look, you're not going to be able to be a member of this church any longer. You're not going to be able to participate in communion. Now, when a church does that, the world is absolutely outraged at the judgmentalism and the rigidity and the condemnation. But look what they're doing to this guy. I mean, he's out of a job. He has been drummed out of a university, drummed off campus. You talk about excommunication. You talk about shunning. You talk about disfellowshipping. You talk about church discipline. Here it is in spades. And University President Susan Herbst said that the reason we got to fire this guy is all students must feel welcome. That was the way she put it. We got to make sure every student is welcome. Well, let me ask you this question, President Herbst. How welcome do you think what you've done here is going to make Christian students feel on the University of Connecticut campus? And the other thought I had is the major mistake that this guy made is what he should have said is we believe that a homosexual should be in the center of our huddle. If this coach had said that, we think a homosexual ought to be in the center of this huddle, they'd already be raising money to put up a statue for him on campus. And then I'd be interested in your reactions to this. 888-589-8840. 888-589-8840. You're familiar with the popularity of that cable series on the Bible. Now, they're taking a portion of that miniseries, that 10-hour miniseries, and they're going to turn it in to a theatrical release the end of this month called The Son of God. It's just about Jesus. Now, if you remember back when the cable series was released, they're using some of the same footage and same actors and all that. There was a problem because the actor that was portraying Satan in the miniseries had a spooky resemblance to Barack Obama. And, of course, they're using the same footage, so it would be the same Satan, the same actor representing Satan, same footage they used in the miniseries. And so you'd have a figure representing Satan that looks like Barack Obama. They got so much blowback from it that they, in fact, the producer said, the devil is on the cutting room floor. There is going to be no Satan in the story about the Son of God. None, zip, zilch. Now, I'd like to know what you think about the fact that they've made a decision to cut Satan out of the story of the gospel. What do you think about that? They're cutting Satan out of the story about the Son of God. Now, the reality is, ladies and gentlemen, you cannot understand the gospel unless you know about Satan. Satan has been the problem, the troublemaker from Genesis chapter 3, verse 1, where he tempted Eve to sin. She drew her husband into the act. He went along with it, and mankind fell into sin because of the work of the tempter, because of the work of the devil, because of the work of Satan. He's been the troublemaker. He's been the problem from day one. He's not a metaphorical being. He's not a symbolic being. He exists. He's a personality. He's unseen, but he is a personality. He is a real being, and he can do things. He can tempt and he can deceive and all that kind of stuff. Now, remember that John said in 1 John 3 that the reason that the Son of God appeared, the title of this movie is The Son of God. And John says the reason the Son of God appeared, the reason the Son of God was made manifest was to do what? To destroy the works of the devil. In other words, it is impossible to understand the incarnation of Christ, the ministry of Christ, the mission of Christ, unless you understand something about the devil, because Christ appeared to destroy the works of the devil. Love to get your reactions, 888-589-8840.